Hello, I am Joe Lindsay, and I'm with Group 2 now, and week 11. And the question is, how does St. Thomas Aquinas argue that the temptation in the desert of Christ is more about the devil finding out who Christ is rather than getting him to fall into sin? Well, first off, St. Thomas is the angelic doctor, so he knows all about pure spirits, and he knows that the good angels have received the beatific vision, so they know that, or they see God face to face. So when they look at Christ, they see God incarnate. They know He's God. Well, the fallen angels don't have this grace. So they, with their natural intellects, when they look at Christ, they would just see a virtuous, holy man, but they wouldn't know who he is. So there would have to be some sort of testing in order to find out. Now, going back to Genesis, right after the fall, Satan would know, because God tells him the seed of the woman is going to crush your head. And so from the proto-evangelium on, Satan is on the lookout for this person. Now, then he's got all the prophecies through Israel's history about the Messiah. So he's got the messianic prophecies, including in Daniel, where it has the 490 years. He's got a pretty good guess, the time frame. So he knows what the Messiah is going to look like. He knows about when it's going to happen. And now he sees Christ, and he's going to test him. So hence comes the test. And when he comes, it's after Christ fasts for 40 days. And it says in the text that, and he was hungry. And St. Thomas notes, interestingly, that when Moses and Elijah fast for 40 days, it doesn't say that they were hungry. So that he sees this as Christ really manifesting his weak humanity. And so when the devil comes, he sees a weak human being, not exactly what he's expecting with this Messiah. So when the devil begins the temptation, he says, if you are the Son of God, then turn these stones into bread. Now, when he begins, if you are the Son of God, St. Thomas notes that he's asking a question. He's not sure. He doesn't say, since you are the Son of God, then do this. If you are the Son of God. So that's a clue that it's more about it's more than just trying to get him to fall into sin. And then St. Thomas also notes, he calls it the marvelous cunning of the devil in the question, that he tempts directly towards one thing in order to indirectly tempt another. And he goes back to Genesis in the temptation of Adam and Eve, how the devil tempts directly with the fruit, trying to get him to eat the forbidden fruit, but indirectly, besides the physical eating, he's trying to get him to do the sneakier, worse sin of falling into spiritual greed and pride. And so he's directly trying to get him to turn the stones into bread. And in doing that, if he does that, then he would see his power and know that he's the Son of God. And St. Thomas thinks that's the main reason. But if he's not the Son of God, then he's also got the temptation. He is trying to get him to fall into sin if he's not the Son of God. So he's working it both ways. Both aspects are there. But St. Thomas thinks the primary reason is finding out who Christ is. And the devil's not stupid. So he knows that if Christ is the Son of God, then he can't sin. He's not going to get him to sin. It would be metaphysically impossible to get him to sin. So the devil's trying to get him to work a miracle to show who he is, if he can't get him to fall into sin. And so he ends up failing miserably, because one thing the devil can't understand is God's humility. That God, who's the omnipotent God, would be so humble that he'd become a weak human being. One of my group members, Richard, mentioned that Christ keeps manifesting his humanity, that not only was he hungry, but that when the devil keeps saying, if you are the Son of God, but then Christ answers, man does not live by bread alone, that Christ is emphasizing his humanity through the whole thing, which again throws Satan off. So Satan sees, in his arrogance, can't see the humility. And also, St. Thomas quotes Jerome, and in the second temptation, when it says that the devil took him up on a high mountain, that St. Jerome thinks, well, the evangelists are putting it in Satan's perspective, that in Satan's opinion, he took him up a high mountain. But really, that was just the devil's arrogance, because it was Christ who's allowing the whole temptation to take place, that Christ is inviting the temptation. And the devil, in his foolishness, thinks that he's in charge. And that got me thinking, too, when Christ responds how does he respond? When the devil tries to tempt him to jump off, and he says, oh, you shouldn't put the Lord your God to the test. As it hit me, it's like, that's exactly what the devil's doing. He's putting God to the test, not realizing that Jesus is God. But Christ's humble humanity, he crushes Satan and defeats him in the test because Satan does not understand humility. He doesn't understand the weakness in the way that God is fulfilling the prophecies. And so the devil fails. And I think St. Thomas is correct in seeing the primary motive is the devil finding out who he is. And I hope I covered it good enough. So thank you and adios.